This is Cruise Radio.
I cruise a lot, and I always sail with travel insurance. You should too. Get a free quote today at tripinsurance.com.
Here we go.
Broadcasting from the tripinsurance.com studios in Jacksonville, Florida. This is Cruise Radio.
Dale and his wife took a 4-night sailing around the Greek Isles, round trip out of Athens, and he joins us to talk about it. How you doing, Dale?
I'm doing great, Doug. How are you today?
Good, and good to talk to you because I'm excited to talk about this Celestyal Cruise because it's a cruise line, Celestyal Cruises, that not a lot of North Americans know about. So what made you want to take this 4-night sailing?
It was my wife and my 25th anniversary, and so she had asked me to take her to Europe for our anniversary. I, of course, couldn't turn that down, and so we had booked a guided tour that took us to Italy and Greece, and then part of the tour had the add-on of this 4-day cruise. So we didn't know it was going to be on the Celestyal Discovery initially, and so we kind of found out about it. It really made it feel like very complete to do that after doing the land portion in Italy and Greece.
This sounds like one of those companies that includes the air, the land, the cruise, like a gateway travel, or there's a lot of them out there.
I mean, yes, they're paired up with the ship. I think what I noticed is on the Celestyal Discovery itself, it kind of felt, and I think this has a lot to do with what you said about a lot of North Americans not knowing about it, is it feels like that it was filled up with tour groups, and then there was a few other random people that were on that were just taking the cruise.
So you do the land part first, then it's right to the ship?
It was back to back. We had gotten to Rome a couple of days early, just of course to account for any flight delays, and then also to sort of adjust to the time zone. We ended the tour at the hotel in Athens, and then the next morning the bus picked us up to take us to the port to board the ship. How
was your embarkation? I know we were talking before recording, and I sailed Celestyal in the Middle East, and it was a little bit different. It wasn't your typical cruise ship embarkation with the steps you had to go through. How long did your embarkation take?
So I would say it is very different from any other ship I've gotten on. It was probably about 30 minutes. I think the biggest things are that they don't have a full-size cruise terminal as we might think of it if you leave from like one of the Florida ports or even leaving from like Long Beach. It's basically essentially like a small warehouse. You go in, you have to do the credit card check-in. It's not like you can do any of that on the app ahead of time. So they register that, they print your room keys for you, collect your luggage, and then you can either take a shuttle to the ship or you can walk to the ship because it's a fair distance from where you check in. It's kind of the ship's down the far end of one kind of long pier from where you actually check in. So we actually ended up walking because I wanted to get a couple of pictures of the ship as we were heading towards it. But really, it wasn't too bad. It was just that I think it was different because what you're doing is that you're checking in fairly early in the morning. I mean, the ship itself leaves Athens at 1:00. So you have to, check in like about, 9:00 or 10:00 to get on the ship in time.
And then you're boarding, since you walk to the ship, you're boarding basically pier side, correct?
Yeah, it was just like getting on the ship if, from any port, basically. You just walk up a gangplank like you would, at any of the stops that it was on.
This ship was an old Carnival Corporation vessel, belonged to IATA. So once you're on board, you make your way through the little hallway to get on there. What were your first impressions of the vessel once you actually got to see it?
Honestly, I thought that it looked beautiful. They did a complete refurbishment. I mean, it would definitely, I don't think there was any spots on board that felt like that they didn't touch as a part of the refurbishment. I mean, as you know, with a lot of ships, they might change out the interior, so that might look a lot different. But as you walk around, there's just always areas that you can kind of tell the age. In this case, it felt like Celestyal just did a really good job of not just changing the livery, not just changing the interior furniture, but really going top to bottom and just making everything was refreshed and painted and really looked good. It was very modern looking inside.
Yeah, because the ship was launched in the early 2000s, like 2002, 2003. So that's good to hear. So what we'll do here is talk about your stateroom. So what kind of stateroom did you book for this 4-nighter? And what did you think of it? Like when they did the whole refresh, did they modernize it at all?
Yeah, definitely. The stateroom was completely modernized. Now, what makes this a little bit unique is because we booked this through the tour, we didn't actually contact the cruise company at all to actually pick a stateroom. So it's just assigned to you. And so one thing I would say for any of your listeners that decide they wanted to do this cruise, you can actually call the cruise company and you can choose to, pay for an upgrade if you wanted to get to like a balcony or something. So for us, we just had an ocean view cabin It was cabin 5157, so it was about the middle of the ship, both vertically and horizontally, and so really nice. I mean, but our room was great. I had no concerns about it at all.
Once a cruise ship starts hitting around 20 years or so, you're going to have AC issues sometimes, plumbing issues, piping, what have you. How was all that?
Felt like they might have addressed some of that stuff as well. Yeah. Air conditioning was great. No problems with the toilets. I mean, I will say a few people that we ran into on board said that they had some issues. It's always hard to tell if that's really a ship problem or, just something that they ran into bad luck with their cabin.
Yeah. All right, let's talk about the food on Celestyal Cruises, and we'll go to the buffet on Celestyal Discovery. Now, the ship only holds 1,200 people, so that's a good start right there. But did it ever feel too crowded in the buffet? And what did you think of the food? Because they have to cater to dozens of nationalities.
So I would say that the food was consistently mediocre, is the best way I can describe it. So the one thing to keep in mind is, calling out that this is not a U.S. cruise line, is that the food is very tailored to European tastes. I think the thing that my wife and I were surprised about is it didn't feel like they had as many Greek specialties as I would have thought that they would have had. I mean, they did have a lot of Mediterranean type of cuisine. The one thing that they did that I thought was really smart is, in addition to having the buffet, which is called the Taverna, their main dining room restaurant during lunch also is set up as a buffet. So you go in, they actually seat you, and then you have a buffet that you can go get from there. And actually, I thought that was a very smart solution, because lunch is the one time that you tend to be on this ship and this itinerary, because it does do so many ports. And so I think that was a great way of balancing out traffic between the main buffet being up towards the top of the ship, and then the main dining room. So we figured that out day one, and because of that, it was never felt crowded to us at all getting food during lunchtime.
Yeah, and for the food, you were saying consistently mediocre. It almost feels like they're just putting we'll call it safe selections, because you have the Europeans, the Australians, the Asians. It's a big melting pot, right? And I know that most cruise ships that we sail are like that, but it's probably 85% North Americans, at least over here in the U.S. So it almost felt to me like they just were going with the standard things that everyone knows across the world, right? You're just your chicken, your burger, your hot dog, your salad bar, your pasta. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And I would totally agree. And I think that it's probably a good news, bad news situation for them. I definitely agree that they're doing it because of the wide range of nationalities they get. Unfortunately, the bad side of that is I feel like that if you're going to that part of the world, you want to enjoy that type of food. And so the fact that, yes, they did have some Greek food on there, but it wasn't maybe flavored the way it would have been if you go to an actual, family run Greek restaurant in Greece. I think it was quite a bit different. I agree with what you call it. Safe is the best way to describe it.
It was. I found it interesting too. You were talking about you went into the main dining room for lunch, and it was just a buffet set up. I went there for breakfast the second morning of the cruise, and I'm like, okay, I want to go, just sit down, have coffee, which you can do in there, but I didn't realize that it was, okay, you're going to serve yourself at the buffet. I was like, okay, I just could have kind of went to the Lido area to eat breakfast, but it was interesting. I've never been on a cruise ship where you go into the main dining room and there's a buffet set up. Not that it's a bad thing, but it just was a first for me.
Yeah, absolutely. And I will say, honestly, we didn't get to try breakfast because with how early morning the ship ends up being in the port and having excursions, we ended up just getting off the ship, getting on our excursion. And so by the time we got back for lunch, we were quite hungry. But yes, I had talked to some of the other passengers, and they said it was set up as a buffet in the morning as well. So I said probably very convenient for the type of audience that they're trying to appeal to. But very different if you're used to kind of how North American cruise ships work.
How about the main dining room and specialty venues, if you did any of those?
The main dining room is called Thalassa. I'm hoping I'm pronouncing that correct. You do kind of have a reserved dining time, but they're pretty open about it. But you can go in, you can ask if, because we were on a tour, we had made some friends on the tour. And so we would eat with different of the friends most nights. And then one night, the tour guide had reserved a bunch of tables together. And so just very casual. You could go in, basically anytime when it was open during dinner, and they would find you seating. The one thing I really want to call out that I thought Celestyal did a great job of is on our last port, we ended up being the last tender back to the ship. And so we were actually getting back to the ship after the main dining room closed. but they actually kept it open because they knew we were coming back from the port. And so I do want to call out that while I may call the food mediocre, I thought the service on Celestyal Discovery was really, really good. And I appreciated, like, that's a small thing, but it meant a lot because, of course, the last port, the last night of the cruise, and we're like, okay, well, I guess we're not getting any food, but they kept it open. So we were able to get some dinner before we had to go pack up and get ready to debark the next morning.
Did the selections in the main dining room have a little more Greek flair to them than the ones in the buffet?
A little bit. I would say that they had, I would call it just more general Mediterranean, is that they had a general Mediterranean theme that they would focus on each night. And then there would be a couple of standard selections, generally like, a steak and some sort of a seafood option. And then the one thing that was unique is you could order from their specialty dining restaurant in the main dining room if you wanted, which was primarily a steak restaurant. And so that was kind of a good option. We did do that one of the nights where just nothing on the menu looked particularly good, but I'm like, okay, I'll get a steak from their specialty restaurant. And that is an additional charge, but it was a nice option to have.
I'm right there with you on that. I was in one of the restaurants. I can't remember which one, but it was very seafood heavy that night. So I did order a steak from the specialty steakhouse. They're a little bit of an upcharge, but it's a good option to have. Kind of like on Carnival or Royal, if you want to, up your main dining room menu, you can.
Yeah, no, it was certainly nice. And then, of course, the same thing would happen, that there was a wine menu on what was included if you had, of course, one of the drink packages. But then also, of course, they had a selection of wines that they would then recommend if you wanted to buy extra. Like I said, I found that out because some people in our tour group, they bought a couple of bottles of wine like the first night, and then they slowly finished them off through the duration of the cruise.
Did you actually do any specialty dining on board?
We did. We did one night. Their specialty dining restaurant is called Grill Seekers, and it is. Like I said, essentially surf and turf. So, it's going to have the multiple steaks, generally like, salmon, shrimp, lobster. I would say it was definitely a higher quality of food than the main dining room. But I would still say if you're used to specialty dining on, Royal Caribbean, Carnival, Celebrity, et cetera, it's not going to be that quality. It's going to be somewhere in between. I mean, I think probably has something to do with where they're sourcing from potentially. So definitely it was definitely better, but definitely not what I would have expected having been on a lot of North America cruises.
It's funny you say that because I went to Grill Seekers on one of the final nights of my cruise, and I had the same experience you did. And I was just chalking it up to thinking, you know what, the beef is probably sourced from somewhere a lot different than what I'm used to. So that's probably exactly why the beef tasted the way it did.
Yeah, absolutely. But I mean, I will say, the service in the specialty dining restaurant was impeccable, though. So they definitely were, continually checking on, making sure that you had what you wanted, checking back to see if you needed your drinks refilled. I mean, I will say in general, I found the service to be better overall than what I've seen on a lot of North America cruise lines, unless you go on the more luxury lines.
With the ship being a smaller ship carrying 1,200 passengers, did you find that it had like a decent coffee shop and a selection of bars around the ship?
Yeah, surprisingly, yes. I actually would say the bars were very much a highlight. They had a good selection of drinks. The bartenders were willing to experiment and make things for you if you asked them. I don't drink coffee, but I do recall that there was a coffee bar on board, and people seemed like they were pretty, happy with it. In fact, I would actually say that might be another highlight, at least what we heard from our friends that were on board the ship, because, of course, the coffee was, Mediterranean countries tend to do coffee pretty well, and so it seemed like they were pretty happy. It was definitely like above like your normal Starbucks or what you might get on, the other cruise lines.
Okay, a couple of questions on this. So you mentioned that for Grill Seekers, is that a flat fee, or did you buy a dining package, or was it a la carte with everything you ordered?
It was a flat fee if you bought the dining package on day one of the cruise. I would say that's probably the other thing, is because we didn't know until kind of later on in the planning of the tour what cruise line we were going on. There wasn't an opportunity to kind of pre-book things like your dining package, your specialty or your drink package, your Wi-Fi, and that kind of stuff. So I will say they hit you up for all that stuff pretty hardcore on day one to get you to sign up because, like I said, I don't think they have a ton of pre-bookings. Now, I think obviously if you book the ship separately, then of course you can do some of that stuff. But of course, since mostly it was tourist groups that were on board, the crew seemed like they were pretty, incented to try and sell that stuff at least at day one of the cruise.
And you were talking about the wine menu in one of the specialty restaurants. Did you also purchase the drink package on the first day?
We did, and it was good. They had 3 levels of package. Because my wife and I don't drink alcohol, we got the mid-level because that does include basically all the non-alcoholic drinks you would want. It had things like hot chocolate, which my wife loves, and then you could get like specialty milkshakes and things like that. They do have a sweets, I don't know what you want to call a sweets place on board. It's called Fig and Honey, where they do gelato and milkshakes, desserts, that sort of thing.
All right, well, let's switch gears here and we'll talk about the entertainment on this ship. How was it during the 4 nights of your sailing?
And so it varied quite a bit. It was the same group each night. And so one thing is that they didn't really have guest performers like you might be used to if you go on a North America cruise line. So the group that they had were singers, dancers, and acrobats. And I think the group was all from Cuba. And so very talented for sure on particularly on the dancing and the acrobatics. The singing was a little bit less consistent. I would definitively say it would depend on the particular show. And if the show theme is interesting to you, you will probably like it quite a bit. If the show theme is not interesting to you, you're probably going to sit there for about the hour or so that it goes on and ask yourself, like, what am I doing here? But there certainly were shows that we saw that we really did like. I think we kind of got a bad taste in our mouth the first night because it just seemed very kind of weird in terms of the theming. I can't even know how to describe the theming except for maybe like you're having a strange dream is the way it would come across.
Around the ship at night, though, guitar players, roving bands, anything like that?
Yeah, there was. I mean, once again, because it's a smaller ship, there probably isn't as much opportunity for music. But there were musicians on board. They were very good. Also, of course, they did have dance, like disco things going on. I mean, I will say if you go on the ship, it's definitely a ship that you're going to want to go on. Not only because of the length of the cruise, but the number of ports that they got in. And so I think you really do go on. You try and get every dollar's worth, and so you're going to be up late at night. And then, into the ports early in the morning.
How was the casino on this ship? Now, on my ship, I will say there was no smoking allowed in the casino. And it wasn't that big at all, but like a couple of tables maybe and, 20 slot machines at max. So how was it on Discovery? Yeah,
very, very much the same. It's a very small casino. I will say that's one thing I liked about the ship is that I don't know that they allowed smoking, which would seem really unusual to me, but you didn't really smell smoke anywhere for sure. And the casino itself was very smoke-free. It was very small. You had to cross through the casino every time you were going to the main dining room, though. I never really saw the casino that busy, and I suppose that might depend on the time of year and the nationalities that might be on board. But it never seemed as busy as what I've seen from a lot of other cruise casinos that I've been on.
Now, here I would typically ask you about sea days, but I realize there are sometimes 2 ports a day on these sailings. So when you were transiting between ports, how did it seem if you had, like, let's say a late arrival or what have you, and people were just congregating around the ship?
It really never felt crowded at all. I mean, you could tell when you got back on the ship, if many of the people had returned or not. But even when the ship was fully, when everybody was on board, it never really seemed crowded. There was always spaces to sit. There was always spaces at like the different bars, always spaces where you could sit and watch the ocean go by. Now, the one nice thing is while there are no sea days, it's very scenic going between the various Greek islands. And so there definitely was a lot to watch as you were cruising between the islands.
So let's talk about some of these awesome ports you went to, very scenic too. And let us give us the first one and then let us know if you hit 2 ports in one day.
The first port was Mykonos, which we got to at about 6:00. We were on time for that. That is a tender port. That's probably the one and only time I would say the ship felt crowded is there was 2 tender ports on this cruise. But when we got to Mykonos, however you want to say it, we did a tour of the port, which included a lot of the churches, showing the little Venice area, and then of course taking you up to the famous windmills where you can get pictures. It was very beautiful. I mean, you're there in the evening, but probably Mykonos is a good port to be in the evening because there's a lot of activity. So of course, a lot of the restaurants and bars were open. All the stores were still open. Got to see a beautiful sunset from there. Definitely a highlight. And of course, started the cruise out right because it was beautiful. It was beautiful weather every day of the cruise, except for the one day that we had a port that we were in all day.
Since this whole vacation was a package deal with land and cruise, did you have to purchase the shore excursions as extra add-ons, or was it all bundled together?
With every shore excursion, we booked it through the tour company. The ship generally offered the same tour packages. Plus, they had some other excursions that you could do as well. I'd say the tour company generally picked the things that were going to be the most appealing. So the first day we met up with our tour guide because it was a different one than we had been with on our tour of Italy and Greece. And she basically said, here are the ones that are included in your tour. Here are the extra cost ones. Just please, let me know which ones you want to do. And so most of our tour group just did all of them. Gotcha. and quite enjoyed that.
All right. So you do Mykonos. What was your next port of call? And was it the same day?
No. So I mean, I would say it was 2 ports on day one, but the first port was leaving Athens and then Mykonos. And then, so you leave Mykonos at 11 o'clock at night. You then pull into Kusadasi, Turkey at 7 a.m. the next morning. And so on that port, obviously it was really, cool because we were in a new country. But on that port, the big thing to do, of course, is to go to Ephesus, which we went and did. Was awesome. Our tour guide got us in as the first group into Ephesus that day. And so we were actually ahead of the crowds. But quite interesting to see that old city. And then, of course, this was one of the tours that was included. And so then they took you to a Turkish rug factory after. Of course, you got to see the beautiful rugs. Right. And then, of course, you got to sit down with a salesman who was hard selling on buying one of the rugs. But, very enjoyable. And then they dropped you off a couple of blocks from the cruise, but, just so you could kind of explore and do some shopping before you got back on. But once again, because you were doing multiple ports a day, in most cases, it was a short time. So we arrived in Turkey at 7 a.m. and we departed at 1 p.m.
Pardon me for laughing, but I'm having flashbacks of when I was over there last March, and they're like, we're going to stop by a rug factory. I'm like, okay, cool. And 45 minutes later, he's rolling out every single rug in inventory, making us walk on it with our socks. $6,000. Yes. It's just like, what?
Yeah, it was, and of course, very much the thing where it's like, like the way that my wife and I have decorated our house, like honestly, a Turkish rug just wouldn't really fit into our styling. But of course, they kept saying, "Oh, we can find one that works." I'm like, "No, I doubt you can, honestly." So
after Kusadasi, where was your next port of call?
Next port of call was Patmos. We got there at 4:30 p.m. and we were there till 9:30 p.m. And so the most popular thing to do there is to go do the tour of the countryside. And then they take you up to the church and grotto of the Apocalypse, which is the place that they believe that the Apostle Paul wrote the book of Revelations. I don't know, obviously how truthful that actually is. I will say it is very unique to be able to go into this cave and there's a view out that looks out on the harbor. It's very beautiful. It was, very worthwhile tour. No matter what your religion is, certainly interesting to see, what the, some of the beliefs about it. And of course you get, you get they tell you to be respectful when you walk in there. There's a priest from the Greek Orthodox Church that is in there. And so, you're not allowed to take pictures, but they give you a lot of information before you go in. And then once again, when you come back down, they drop you off, a couple of blocks away from the ship so that you can choose to do some shopping if you want. And, like I said, that was just it was very nice. The one thing I recognized on this particular cruise is this isn't going to be like your normal Caribbean cruise where it's like you might just choose to do a beach day. It's kind of worthwhile to see how unique each of the Greek islands is and how different they are from each other.
So you're back on board after Patmos. Where was your next port of call the following day?
So our next port of call probably felt the most like our sea day because it was our only day that we were in port all day, and that was in Rhodes. And so in Rhodes, we were there from 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. And there we did the tour where we went to see the Acropolis of Lindos, and then we went to see the Citadel of the Knights. And so Rhodes is, the most kind of medieval type of city, I would say, right? It still has a lot of the kind of fort that's built up around. And of course, the inside of the fort has turned into kind of a marketplace. Definitely feels, the most like almost like you're actually back in European mainland in a way, just because of the fact that it has a fort, it has a castle, that sort of thing. That was the only day of the cruise that we got bad weather. And so it was rainy quite a bit while we were there. But when we did the tour, they take you by where historically they think the Colossus of Rhodes was, which was one of the seven wonders of the ancient world. There's a big aquarium there. We didn't get a chance to go to that, but definitely if I got to go back, that would be something. It's very modern looking and apparently is pretty highly rated. So, and honestly, if you were going to go to the beach, Rhodes would be the day to do a beach because there is a pretty nice kind of white sand beach that is less than a mile from where the cruise ship docks.
How hot was it when you were over there? I'm remembering now that like last summer, August especially, people were falling out and having heat strokes over in Athens just because of the temps over there. Was it bad when you were there as well?
So yeah, it was kind of interesting. So it was, I would say on the Greek islands, it was generally like 80 to like 85 each day. Even the day that it rained, it didn't really cool off that much. Now doing the doing the Italy and Greece part was definitely a lot warmer, definitely above 90 most of the days. What was a little bit weird is we were kind of being followed by bad weather, but we were in good weather. So like the day after we left Rome got hit with a major thunderstorm. I think it damaged the gate that's right outside the Colosseum. I think a lightning bolt hit it. And then only when we were going back from Florence to Milan to catch our plane to Greece did we actually like drive through the thunderstorm. And that was pretty wild. It was definitely comparable with like a thunderstorm in the Midwest here. But yes, people were saying that they had gotten like no rain at all, and it had been a lot hotter than it had been previous years. So definitely you could, even the residents of the islands were saying how warm it was.
So then your next day after all day in Rhodes, where were you off to?
So our next day is basically the last day of the cruise, and we are in Crete in the morning from 7 a.m. to noon. There we went and did the tour of the Minoan Palace, which is phenomenal archaeological site. It's really known for having bright paintings, and of course, part of the mythology is that this is where they think the Minotaur would have resided. And so there's different statues to minotaurs and cows that are around. They're very, very nice, very beautiful day. Once again, that would be a day, if you had a little bit just to go explore, probably Crete is a pretty large island. And so that's one probably I felt like we didn't get to see as much as we would have liked to, although definitely seeing the palace was very much a highlight.
Covering a lot of ground here. So you leave Crete, and what was your final port?
So the final port is probably the highlight for what most people, if they're going to do the Greek islands, which was Santorini. Mm-hmm. We arrived at about 4:30 p.m. and we were there until 9:30 p.m. Santorini was very unusual. And of course, for those of you who haven't been there, it is a tender port. Now, the wind apparently was blowing the wrong way that day. And so there were, I think, 4 or 5 other ships in the harbor when we got there, in the caldera. And they told us that we were the only ship that was actually able to launch our tenders and get to the shore. And so, but we weren't able to go to the main place that you generally disembark in Santorini. We actually went to a dock that was actually right by the cars that take you up to the top. And so that was a little bit unusual. Now, having said that, they told us that like none of the other ships had been able to get in. I will say It scares me if they would have been able to get in, because Santorini was by far the most crowded of any of the Greek islands we were on this cruise. So we took the cable car up to the top where you get, of course, the just beautiful view of the whole caldera, all the ships there. It's beautiful. The water's, perfectly blue. And then our tour there was actually taking us down to the end of the island where the village of Oa is. And so you can get, that's where you get the beautiful pictures of the blue domed churches. And also just when the weather's great, just gorgeous sunsets. My one tip, if you go there, besides the fact of course, be very, very careful because there's so many people there, is right around sunset, people are clamoring for the best spots and it's very crowded. Mm-hmm. What we found is we saw a restaurant that was just up a flight of stairs. And so we went up there really quick and said, hey, we don't have time to stay for dinner, but if we buy a couple of drinks from you, we let us sit here and take pictures. And they were like, absolutely. And so we were able to get some really nice unobstructed pictures of the caldera and the ships, but also of the sunset and not be in crowds, which is by far the best. And so, like I said, Santorini is absolutely gorgeous. But I certainly can understand why they want to limit tourists to it, because it is the most crowded. It felt like I was in, Disney World on like the highest crowd day ever.
Yeah, you see a lot of those. You see Santorini highlighted in a lot of the Instagram versus reality things where it's like, it's such a beautiful, it's so quiet and quaint. And then when you get there and actually experience it in person, it's nothing like that at some spots.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I sent you one of the pictures that we took, and so it was beautiful. I mean, it was beautiful seeing the ships down there, and it's all about timing. If you take the pictures of the blue dome churches at the right moment, mm-hmm. you can get it where it looks like that they are good. Like there's not a lot of people around them, but just recognize there are a lot of people around them and you may not be able to get the pictures. So that's one other recommendation I would make, is if instead of spending so much time trying to capture a perfect picture, that might be worthwhile to just, cough up a few dollars and buy one from one of the stores, because then you're going to get a picture without the people in it. And, you can tell everybody it's the picture that you took or whatever, because it's gorgeous. I mean, I took some great pictures there, but when I got home, I ended up buying a picture online that's in my office because I just wanted a picture of those churches without anybody around them.
Yeah, certainly. So then after Santorini, you're back to Athens, correct?
Yeah. So yeah, you get back on the ship. Like I said, we got back. We were the last tender in. So I guess we were the pier runners. It was really nice because as we're getting off the tender, they said, hey, that we kept the restaurant open for you. So we went up, got our main dining. They did have it much later than most cruise ships that I've been on in terms of having your luggage out. Like it had to be out by like midnight, I think. And so the next day we were back in Athens. And then once again, disembarkation was actually pretty smooth. Although once again, because it's not a regular like cruise terminal, a lot of the luggage ends up being together. And we found out it wasn't sorted as well as a lot of North American cruise lines do. As an example, like 3 of our pieces of luggage were together and one was kind of on the other side of where all the luggage was stored. And so, just that was a little bit chaotic. But other than that, like I said, really, really good. I mean, and I will say, if you feel on a North American cruise, like they're trying to get you off the cruise right away, when they have to depart again at 1:00 the day that you arrive back in the port, they really are pushing you to get to the ship as quick as possible.
I did notice that, and be out of your room by 7:00 too was which was fine with me because I had a day hotel when I got off, so I could just check right into that. But a lot of people were pushing back on it. But I'm like, yeah, but they're leaving here. They're legit boarding more people and trying to get out of here in just a couple of hours. So it's like a turn and burn for them, like you said.
Honestly, I don't know how they do it because when we got on board, they actually let us take our carry-on to our room, which of course, a lot of cruise companies don't want you to do now. I think people were pretty good, but I mean, you could tell that our cabin steward had worked on our room, but it wasn't quite done. Mm-hmm. And that was fine. We just dropped our luggage off and went to watch sail away. But yeah, I don't know how they turned around that fast. I mean, yes, it's not that many passengers, but it's still, that's a very, very quick turnaround each day.
Dale, do you have any first-time tips to offer someone who might be considering either Celestyal Cruises or doing a Greek Isle tour?
The few things I would say is don't prepare yourself for a relaxing cruise. Definitely recognize that this is going to be a go, but it's not going to be like a a booze cruise. It's but if you're going to go to the Greek islands, you want to take advantage of the time that you get there. This is one where I would also say, generally, for a lot of ports that I may go to now, I can just get off and explore on my own. Just because your time in port is so short, it's probably worthwhile to spend the money to do the excursions, so you actually get to see the highlights, and then also make best use of the time. And then I think probably the last thing is just recognize that there are going to be quite a few things on this ship that are going to be different than what you might be used to if you go on a North American cruise. But that doesn't mean that they're bad. They're actually, they actually are really nice, and you recognize, you got to hear, we got to hear more languages on this cruise than I think I have in any other cruise I've been on. That was really cool. We got to meet people from all over the world, and so just be very open and don't. This is one where I'd say, as an American, don't bring your Americanness to the cruise. Come to the cruise and recognize that this is a multinational, and really enjoy that.
You mentioned it was full court press on day one with trying to get you to sign up for a drink package, dining package. Were a lot of people biting there, or were they just did they keep walking and ignore that?
I think a lot of people were signing up for it on day one. I mean, I will say I did hear other people complaining to their tour guides about it because, I think a lot of people, of course, had spent a tremendous amount of money to take their guided tours of wherever they were coming from. And so probably feeling like the additional fees were a lot. I would generally say this is one where I might also recommend be very thoughtful about if you want to get the drink package or not, because you're just not going to be on the ship very much. And so if you are trying to get your value out of it, you're going to struggle to do so, I think.
Yeah, no, for sure. Do you feel like the value was there for the price you paid?
I mean, yes, I think it was, in terms of it was a nice, I guess I would call it a nice taster of the Greek islands. Like, now that I did this short cruise, my wife and I want to go back where we get longer time on each of the islands, because, like I said, it did feel very like we're rushed. And so, yes, when people say, "Oh, have you been to Mykonos? Have you seen the beautiful windmills there?" Yes, I have, but literally I had about 5 minutes at the windmills and took a couple of pictures. It wasn't like I got to spend, an hour or so walking around looking at each one and really, looking at the craftsmanship.
What was the biggest highlight of this cruise for y'all?
How beautiful and how unique each of the Greek islands was. Like I said, I thought the ship was great. The service was tremendous. Like I said, I would like to do a longer one, but I certainly wouldn't turn down an opportunity to go on, Celestyal Discovery or do this 4-day again. I might pace myself a bit more, but it really was a great cruise. I can't say anything negative about it.
Well, final thoughts of Celestyal Discovery.
It's a great looking ship. It's obvious the cruise company has put a lot of money into it. I do think that, similar to some of the newer cruise brands we're starting to see in North America, they're learning a little bit who their target audience is. And so you might see some inconsistency, but definitely I would sail them again. And I would recommend that it really is a great itinerary if you want to, get a quick overview of the Greek islands and get a chance to visit them and decide which ones you might want to go to for a longer visit.
Do you feel like this is the right ship for this kind of itinerary?
I do, because this is definitely, the ship is not the destination here, because it is an older ship. There's only one swimming pool on board. There is only one specialty dining. I mean, there is a grill that we didn't talk about, which that just serves like, kind of Greek bagels and some gyros and things like that. But overall, I mean, like I said, you're not on the ship that much. And so the fact that it's small means that it's easy to navigate. And you don't spend time like being lost the first couple of days like you do on some of the mega ships.
We've been talking with Dale about his 4-night cruise on Celestyal Discovery. Dale, as always, great talking to you, my friend, and thanks for sharing this vacation with us.
Absolutely. Thank you, Doug.
A big question we get at Cruise Radio is, how do I know if I need trip insurance? Simple answer. If you're getting on a plane, taking a road trip, or getting on a cruise ship, you need to have travel insurance. Hey, it's Doug Parker from my friends at tripinsurance.com. Not only does tripinsurance.com protect your vacation investment, but it also gives you peace of mind in case anything were to go wrong on your trip. How do they do it? They offer 3 different types of trip insurance policies. Good, better, and best. One policy for every vacation budget. But it doesn't just stop there. They're up to 40% lower when you shop around on other comparison sites. Plus, tripinsurance.com offers 24-hour customer support before, during, and after your trip, online claims assistance, and travel alerts to let you know what's going on at your destination. But find out for yourself. Check out tripinsurance.com.
All right, Dougie, let's see what we got for you, buddy. Cruise Radio is produced at the tripinsurance.com studios in Jacksonville, Florida. Get cruise news, ship reviews, and money-saving tips every Thursday on Cruise Radio. If you've enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to the show. If you want to help spread the word, give Cruise Radio a 5-star review. Find Cruise Radio where you listen to your favorite podcast or online at cruiseradio.net. I'm your announcer,